Good morning, everyone. I'd like to start off with a quote from Albert Einstein. Insanity is the act of doing the same thing again and again, expecting a different result. So in a certain case scenario, maybe if we failed, we should probably imagine revisiting our previous condition and revising our failure or mistake instead of repeatedly failing or making the same mistake. That's simply insane. Today I hope to inspire all you guys to learn from your mistakes and embrace failure as a unique learning experience. This is important because we're all students and the majority of us are so young, we have so much of our lifetime ahead to experience failure and truly embrace and learn from it. After personal experience and weeks of research, I'd consider myself a very credible source on this topic. I hope to inspire you all to adopt necessary changes in order to maximize every learning experience that may root from failure. I will do this by utilizing three main points. I will demonstrate the need for learning experiences that could come from failure. Secondly, I will propose different methods used in order to learn from failure and embrace it. Lastly, we'll observe different lifestyles that have adopted these different methods, in order to make their failure a success story. Next, let's go ahead and understand why we might need failure in order to achieve a unique learning experience. First, according to edutopia.org, a George Lucas Educational Foundation website, accessed May 2nd, I quote, "The person who really thinks learns quite as much from his failures as much as his successes." This is important because as students, we fail all the time. From point reductions to lacking body movement to a bad grade on a math test, we aren't successful all the time. It's quite impossible to be. So it's important that we understand and learn from failure at such a young age in order to make it beneficial later. Secondly, according to the same source, the famous early educational reformer John Dewey states, "Failure does not mean you lose, it means you can do better." If we simply embraced failure, we can make changes to every failing situation in order to apply those changes and be successful at a much more improved rate than before. To review, we learned why it's vital for us students and young people to learn from every failure and how it's important to embrace failures in a positive manner. Next, let's go ahead and review the different methods that can be utilized in order to learn from our failures. Throughout my second point, I will present three effective methods which come from HarvardBusinessReview.org, website accessed May 3rd by Amy Edmondson, which include the blame game, preventable failures, and inevitable failures. Firstly, the blame game, which calls for an acknowledgement of responsibility in a failure, is one I'm sure we all struggle with. And from personal experience, I recently had a math test that I didn't do so well on, and I blame my teacher in the his lack of teaching of the subject. But really, when I looked deeper into myself, I realized it was my studying habits that really needed improvement. Secondly, it's preventable failures that play the largest role in our learning experiences. By analyzing previous failures, we're able to apply those certain aspects of that failure into another fundamental situation that's very similar. Lastly, one must acknowledge that some failures are simply inevitable. By moving on from a failure and accepting that there isn't just one solution, we could expand and move on from certain toxic situations that could be negative for our health. Lastly, let's observe the difference in a lifestyle that really used the methods of learning from our failures in order to make his failure a success story. In an interview with Steve Jobs by NBC News, what Steve Jobs taught us, it's okay to fail. Access April 28th. Steve Jobs went from being fired at Apple to creating Next, a successful computer company which was later bought out by Apple, to which he joined Apple again and became the CEO. By embracing his failure and looking at it in a positive manner and ways to improve, he climbed back to the top of his company. Let's ask ourselves, what would happen if Steve Jobs didn't learn from his success and he never took any meaningful message out of that? We simply wouldn't have all those beloved iPhones we have in our pockets today. He wouldn't be rich, and he probably would have missed out on the most valuable life experience of his time. To conclude, let's review what we discussed. I hope today that I have inspired every single one of you to embrace and learn from every failure, no matter how small or large, by presenting the need for learning experiences through failure, the different methods used to overcome failure, and the real-life application of those learning experiences. This is important because we're all human, and we know that we can't be perfect at everything. There are times I even stuttered during the speech. Not a failure, but I could look at that to improve. Just like all you guys have improved drastically, and your speeches have been increasingly great since the first day I saw your red faces. I sincerely urge you guys as a friend and fellow student to adopt the positive views of failure and practice those methods that are necessary in order to make every unique learning experience worthwhile. Finally, I'd like to leave you with the idea that failure is never a reason to give up. Only you could find the motivation to make every failure a unique and beneficial learning experience.